So have you ever had to get a grip? Have you ever had to get a grip? Get a grip is one of those things that Raven may say to Robin or Beast Boy on Teen Titans Go, or it might be something that Jenny Piccolo would yell over at Joni Cunningham in the hallway somewhere. Or in the movie Aladdin, when the evil villain came up with his evil plan, Iago the parrot began to slap him on the face and say, "Get a grip, Jafar." So get a grip, and that means is that you're out of control. You're not thinking straight. You need to pull it together and get a grip. Another way of thinking of getting a grip is to understand something. You have some comprehension, you gain some knowledge, some situation you actually now understand. You've gotten a grip on the situation. The original meaning of get a grip comes from the ocean. It's when a sailor would be on a boat, and in the swells of the ocean, as the boat was going up and down, the sailor might grab a hold of a rope or grab a hold of a rail and just brace himself and get a grip. Or if you're not into boats, imagine someone sitting in a booth at Waffle House and they grab a hold of a plate of bacon. They're getting a grip on something that's super important. But what if you couldn't get a grip? What if you could not get a grip, and not getting a grip actually helps you get a grip? What if is it that you couldn't control something, you couldn't understand something, you couldn't grab hold of something, but not being able to do those things actually helped you understand and actually helped you get a grip? Now, first glance, that sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook, but it's not. It's real. So what does it mean that not getting a grip can actually help you get a grip? And when you consider all the crazy things happening in the world or even happening in your personal life right now, how in the world could not getting a grip help you get a grip on all of those things? Well, we're continuing our series called Above All, where we're looking at a unique moment in the life of the prophet Isaiah. And in this moment, he could not get a grip, and in not getting a grip, it helped him get a grip. Our sermon today is called Above All Grips, and we're going to be looking in the Bible at Isaiah chapter 6. Listen as Isaiah describes his experience. Verse 9. And he said, "Go and tell this people." Isaiah's in the middle of what we might call an out-of-body experience. He's in a moment more than 700 years before Jesus was born when he caught a glimpse of God. In this moment, in this time, in his country, there was great political, financial, and social unrest and uncertainty. Sound familiar at all to us? And in this moment of uncertainty, in this out-of-body experience, he caught a vision of God. The one true, holy God allowed Isaiah to catch a glimpse of his power and his majesty and his authority over all of the universe. And Isaiah saw God in this vision seated on the throne that is above every other throne in the universe. And there were fiery angelic beings hovering above the throne. And over with a loud voice, they were saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the God of angel armies. The whole earth is full of his glory." What is the glory of God? Christopher Morgan defines it this way: the glory of God is the magnificence, the worth, the loveliness, and the grandeur of his many perfections, which he displays in his creative and redemptive acts in order to make his glory known to those in his presence. Are you in the presence of God? A little earlier, we sang a song that had these words: "From the highest of heights to the depths of the sea, creation is declaring God's majesty." And what that means is that the grandeur of God and his perfections can be seen in the mighty waves of the ocean and his grandeur and his perfections can be seen in the microscopic breath that just came out of your mouth. In other words, if you are alive, you're in the presence of God because you're part of his creation. But Isaiah is not just alive as part of creation. He is experiencing the presence of God at a whole nother level. And in this moment, he was struggling. He could not get a grip on what was happening. It was mesmerizing. It was beyond anything he could comprehend or understand, and he could not get a grip on it. And yet, in the middle of not getting a grip, he began to get a grip. Because what was happening was he was beginning to see that God is holy, holy, holy. Christianity is not just a bunch of religious activities. At the core of Christianity is God himself, his character. What we do, who we are as human beings, whether we believe in God or not, is still connected to the creative character of God. Isaiah was mesmerized, but he heard and he saw the glory of God. He saw the grandeur of God all around him. And right before verse 9, it tells us that he humbled himself. Like when he saw God, he knew this was something he had never seen before. And he humbled himself. And he cried out in a way that said, I'm not worthy to be in this moment. I'm not worthy to experience any of this. Because what Isaiah was seeing was that God is God and he is not. God was holy, 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 other. And Isaiah knew he was not. And it brought him low. And here in verse 9, God has received that humility. He's received that confession from Isaiah. And now he is handing Isaiah a call. What kind of call? Well, God calls him to go and tell. Go and tell what? Go and tell about the magnificence, the worth, the loveliness, the power, the majesty, the grandeur of his glory. Isaiah, go and tell people that what you are seeing is beyond comprehension. And once they see it, they will begin to understand that I am God and they are not, and that will actually help them get a grip. I saw recently that somebody said many years ago that people are starving for the grandeur of God. Starving. All over the world, starving for the grandeur of God. And they don't even know it. They can't even see it. What is it that you're longing for in your life right now? Like what's that thing that you're really longing for? Is it money or marriage? Is it more help at school, more fun on the weekends, more sprinkles on your ice cream, more chocolate on your donuts, more common sense among government, maybe even more illustrations about bacon and Pokemon and Teen Titans Go in the sermon? What is it that you want more of? What do you want more of? Whatever it is, whatever that longing may be, that longing, if you get it, will still not satisfy the deepest hunger of your soul. What we are starving for the most can only be met in the glory and the grandeur of God. Isaiah was experiencing the glory and the grandeur of God. And God says, okay, you've experienced this. Now I want you to go tell people a message about my glory and my grandeur. So what does that message sound like? Listen to what God tells Isaiah to tell the people. Verse 10. Keep on listening, but do not understand. And keep on looking, but do not gain knowledge. Can you imagine this moment? Isaiah, he steps out on the stage of the local community amphitheater. He steps up to a microphone or a press conference, or he steps up behind a pulpit at a church, and he says, "Hear ye, hear ye. I have an amazing message about the glory and grandeur of God, and you really, really need to listen to it. However, you will never understand it, and you will never get any of it. Sounds like a real crowd pleaser, right? And there's got to be more to the message than just that, right? Well, there is. God continues, verse 10. Make the hearts of this people insensitive, their ears dull, and their eyes blind, so that they will not see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and return and be healed. Okay, so it was a motivational speech, right? Yeah. Motivational speech motivating you to never listen to Isaiah again, right? I mean, this is a crazy message. And just a quick flash forward, Isaiah heard God that day. He took the message. He did go and tell people for about 60 years, and nobody joined his church. Shocker, right? Doesn't sound like the kind of sermon most people really want to listen. So how is this strange message, a message about the glory and grandeur of God? How is this message that sounds like, hey, talk to people, but they're never going to understand it? How in the world does that bring the glory and grandeur of God into our scope of thinking? Well, thankfully, we have a theological expert with us this morning to explain all this, and that theological expert is not me. The theological expert is Jesus. One day Jesus was teaching, and he was teaching a crowd of people, and in the crowd, he told them a parable. And what's a parable? Well, the way we've defined parable around here for a number of years now is when you take a real-life truth and set it beside a real-life situation so that real-life people will know how to do life for real. So a real-life truth next to a real-life situation so that real-life people will know how to do life for real. And on this day, in this moment, Jesus is telling a parable that's known as the parable of the sower, or the parable of the soils. And this is what the beginning of the parable sounds like. Luke chapter 8. A farmer went out to sow his seed. Some of it fell on the road. It was tramped down and the birds ate it. Other seed fell in the gravel. It sprouted, but withered because it didn't have good roots. Other seed fell in the weeds, and the weeds grew with it and strangled it. Other seed fell in rich earth and produced a bumper crop. So that was the first part of the parable that Jesus shared with the whole crowd. And then he stopped and he turned to his closest friends, the disciples. And then he said this to them. Luke 8, verse 10. To you, it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God, but to the rest they are told in parables, so that while seeing they may not see, and while hearing they may not understand. Did you hear that? More than 700 years after God told Isaiah his message, Jesus quotes directly what God says. Jesus says the exact same thing. But he didn't stop. He kept talking. He goes on to explain to the disciples exactly what this parable is all about. The seed in the parable is the truth of God. All the encompassing truth of God, the whole truth of God, the truth of his character, that he is holy, 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 that the whole earth is full of his glory. The truth of his son, Jesus, and his birth and life and death and resurrection and ascension and promised return. The truth of his word, the Bible, and all that he designed to be in there, that he orchestrated what's in the Bible is what we need to read and hear and know the most. And so the seed is all of the truth of God. And what happens to the seed? Well, the seed is sowed. It's scattered. And when it's scattered, it falls places. So when we see or hear or read the truth about God, it falls in different places. And Jesus said it falls in 4 kinds of places. The first place, he says, is it falls on a road or a sidewalk, meaning that people hear God's truth, but then they quickly ignore it or just reject it. They may go to a church service, they may watch a YouTube video of Billy Graham, they may even have somebody personally witness to them, and they hear, they listen, but like a sidewalk, like a road, the seed just hits, and it goes nowhere. There's nowhere for it to grow because they just feel like, I don't really need God. It's a hard ground. Jesus in this parable is basically saying that type of soil, that type of ground is a target, an easy target for the enemy. Brian Bell said this, a hard heart does the devil's work for him. So pray that your heart is not hard toward God. The second kind of place the seed falls is on gravel or rocky soil. It means that people hear the truth about Jesus. They may even have an emotional experience at a church service or a camp or even in a personal witnessing situation. And there's something that happens in that moment. They respond to the truth about Jesus, but then a few days later or a few weeks later, it just kind of fades. They get over it and they move on to something or someone else. It's not that they weren't excited, but the excitement wore off quickly because they never understood the price of following Jesus. They couldn't get a grip on the price. And what is the price of following Jesus? Well, according to Jesus, the price is everything. Heart, mind, body, soul, money, family, friends, job, free time, everything. It's all encompassing. It's your emotions, your attitude. It's even your eternity. Everything is connected to following Jesus. The third kind of place the seed falls on is thorny soil, like a vacant lot with a lot of seeds. And that, it means that people hear the gospel, they hear the truth about Jesus, they respond, and they hang out with Jesus for a pretty good clip. I mean, they roll along for a pretty good while, but then they get a promotion at work. And that promotion, completely changes their schedule, and they just don't have time to really spend any time with God. They don't have time to read their Bible. They don't have time to pray. They don't have time to stay involved in the church. Or maybe it's not a promotion. Maybe they lose their job. And they get so discouraged and so stressed out, and eventually they're just like, you know what? God's not loving. He's not nice because I'm unemployed. And they just fade away from church and fade away from paying attention to God. Or maybe it's not work at all. Maybe it's family, friends, kids. Maybe their kids sign up for a bunch of extracurricular activities. And next thing you know, they're making every concert and every practice and every game and everything in the universe. And they just don't have time to be alone with God. They don't have time to read their Bible and pray. They don't have time to be connected to the church. And they just kind of fade away. Or maybe they take up some kind of sport, some kind of hobby, and it begins to demand all their time. I mean, they're just pickleballing every single night. They can't breathe. There's so much pickleball. And suddenly they're wrapped up in that sport. They're wrapped up in that hobby. Or maybe they buy a new car or a motorcycle or an RV, and all of a sudden, hey man, we got travel plans. Sorry, we cannot be involved with God. We can't be involved in his work. We're just too busy moving and traveling. Or maybe they get sick. Or maybe the TV coverage of their favorite sports team moves to Sunday morning. Maybe their curling iron breaks. Maybe, they just suddenly can't find their favorite Jell-O at the grocery store. I mean, whatever it may be. In other words, all of a sudden, normal things that happen in life that create problems, those normal things all of a sudden become like little idols. And all of a sudden, all of the attention, all of the obsession is on things that are going to fade away, things that are not going to be here forever, but we can't turn away. In other words, there's lots of good things, lots of things that are not evil, they're not bad, but they stir us just to say, I don't have time for God. I don't have time for his work anymore. The fourth kind of place the seed falls is on good soil, rich soil. I mean, right out there in the middle of the fertile field, right out there in the flower garden in the front yard. I mean, it's good soil, and the seed falls there. And what that means is that that's people hearing the gospel, responding to the gospel, and then they do something. They keep hearing the gospel. They keep responding to the gospel. They keep hearing the gospel. They keep responding to the gospel. I was listening to an interview with a very older actor. And the question was asked, so what are you doing as you age, at this time in your grand career? And he just said, you know what? There's so much to learn. I'm just learning so much. The reality is, as believers, when it falls on good soil, that seed, it bears fruit. It's not perfect fruit, okay? Because every Christian messes up, every Christian fails. But there's fruit. There's a desire to learn. There's desire for more of the gospel. And that fruit becomes something where there's real joy. There's real love. There's real satisfaction in Jesus. So when it comes to Jesus repeating these words from so long ago from Isaiah, what did he want his disciples to get? Why did he turn to them and use the same direct quote that God used with Isaiah to them? What was he trying to get them to see? He was just trying to help them see that there are going to be people who reject God and reject God's truth. Why? Because they have bad soil. So a good question for us to always ask is, what's the soil of our heart like? Is it rocky? Is it gravelly? Is it strangling? Is it choking up? Or is it good soil? Are we able to engage with the truth of God and it comes in and it grows? Not perfect, but it grows. It's there. In other words, the good soil means we never lose a hunger for God. We never forget that what we're starving for the most is the glory and the grandeur of God. Now, does that mean that people with bad soil can never get saved? Well, listen again to what God said to Isaiah. So that they will not see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and return and be healed. So there is healing. There's this coming to God, this returning to God. And those are sweet words. Return and heal. J.C. Ryle said this: there is no sin too black and bad to be pardoned. There is no heart too hard and wicked to be changed. Now, let's just be honest. Do we all not have at least one person in our world that we go, oh, that's not true of them? That's not true of that guy. That's not true of her. Do we all know just one person that we've been around, or maybe we see at work, at school, or wherever, like, oh man, there's no way. Oh, there's a way. There's a way. There is no heart too hard and wicked to be changed. Now, to be clear, there are people with their dying breath who will raise their fist at God and curse him. But until that dying breath, there is no heart that can't be changed and healed. How? How can a heart be healed like that? Well, when Jesus finished his parable about the sower and the soils, just a few moments after that, this is what he said to his friends. Luke 8:18. So take care how you listen. So healing starts with hearing. Healing starts with hearing. So the question is, what are you listening to? What is it that you're listening to the most? Just consider the normal routine of your life. What news or music or social media or pontificating politicians are filling your minds with all kinds of information. Because what goes into our ears gets to our heart. We understand that, right? It gets down there. What we're pouring into our heart gets to our mind and feeds to our heart. So what's your heart hearing these days? What are you listening to the most? You know how you know? What do you talk about the most? Many years ago, I remember hearing a guy saying, if Jesus is on your mind, he'll come out of your mouth. That's super simple. But you know what? If all the things of the world are on your mind, it'll come out of your mouth, If everything that's happening in the news is what's constantly on your mind, it's what's constantly going to come out of your mouth. So what are you hearing? What are you listening to? And it matters, Because what you're hearing determines whether or not there's some healing. What you're listening to determines what's happening in your heart. Isaiah was listening to a lot of uncertainty around him. I mean, a lot of uncertainty. He could not get a grip on what was happening in the world with politics, with finances, with society. He just couldn't. He couldn't get a grip on it. But then he caught this vision of God. And suddenly he realized he was never going to get a grip on it. Never. There was never going to be this moment that he was going to understand all of it. There was never going to be this moment that his candidate was going to be elected and everything was going to be great. That will never happen. Ever. The only candidate that will ever make anything right is Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. It's why we pray and long for his return, because in the meantime, we're just doing the best we can. So Isaiah was hearing all of this, but then he saw God. And he realized he was never going to get a grip. He was never going to understand it all. He was never going to have control of anything. And suddenly, that helped him get the grip he needed the most. What in the world does that mean? I was reading a story earlier this week about a man who was reflecting back on a moment when he was a little boy. Their family was at the beach, and he was out playing in the waves when suddenly he lost his footing. And the water just pulled him in really fast. And he's underwater. He felt, even as a little boy, he's like, I just felt like I was getting pulled out to the middle of the sea immediately. He said, I wasn't a strong swimmer to begin with, so I couldn't really get my bearings. I couldn't find the ground for my feet. He said, I remember being afraid and then in a millisecond, panicking. And he said, the only thing that was going through my mind, because I couldn't scream out, I'm underwater, but the only thing I could think of was, is there anybody who can save me? Is there anybody who can help? And he said, about that moment, he goes, I felt this hand grab the top of my arm and pull me out of the water. He said, when that hand grabbed my arm, I didn't fight it. I didn't try to push it off. I didn't resist it. I was overjoyed to be overpowered. And he said when he came up out of the water, he saw his dad. He had been right there near him in the waves when he went under. And what was a moment of panic and fear suddenly became well. All was well, because his father had a grip on him. When you hear God's truth, don't fight it. Don't resist it. Don't reject it. Enjoy being overpowered. Overjoy in being overpowered. Don't harden your heart. Discover the amazing satisfaction, the glory and the grandeur of being in the grip of God's grace. Look, there's a lot of things in this world that are hard to understand. We got, 30 days now till everybody says it's D-Day in the United States? Can I just tell you, that is a lie? Because even if it's D-Day, it will never be D-Day with Christ. God is holy, holy, holy. Your candidate is not. God is glorious and full of grandeur, and none of our money is glorious and full of grandeur. And we stand today understanding that our neighbors to the north and south and west are all experiencing what it means for life to disappear without warning. The only thing that is real and lasting and full and free and satisfying is being in the grip of God's grace. We will not always be able to understand what's happening. We will not always be able to grab hold of something. We will not always be able to understand what's going on. But when God has you in the grip of his grace, all is well and all will